And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Susan Carty Gilley, who had a near-death experience due to a seizure. Susan, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Well, it's a pleasure having you. And Susan, let's start with a little bit of your backstory before we get into your NDE.
I suffer from polyneuropathy in my hands and feet, and for the past 18 years. And when I had my NDE 4 years ago, I had been suffering polyneuropathy for 14 years. And I was on heavy medication. And the doctor I was seeing at the time had me assign this a contract agreement that I would not drink alcohol or take other, types of street drugs or anything, while I was on this medication. And I agreed and I signed it. I didn't think much about it. And went about my business. And I drink wine with dinner occasionally, not till I get belligerent or anything. But I had wine with dinner before my appointment the night before. And I had an early appointment. And so I popped positive for alcohol in my urine test. And my doctor just went nuts and declared that he wasn't going to treat me any longer and that he couldn't write my prescription. And nothing I said, could talk him out of it. And so I left in tears and went home and thought, well, I've got to find another physician because I had to have this medication. I'd been on it for 14 years. And so a few days passed, and that's when the seizure struck. And little did I know, I had no idea that, that I was off the drug cold turkey, what it would do to my body. So my husband and I were sitting in our kitchen, as we do a lot, and we were joking around and talking, and everything was fun. We were laughing, and it got a little quiet, and I don't know if it was intuition or a premonition, but something didn't feel right, and that's when the seizure struck. And my head snapped back, and I hit the back of the kitchen chair with my neck. It broke my neck. I ended up standing up, which I don't remember. My husband told me about this later, and then fell to the floor. And that's when everything went black. And it was immediate. I was out of my body, and I was in this black, velvety void. I call it a void. There was nothing there, no one there. There was no sound. And then I noticed in the distance a small pinpoint of light. And it gradually got bigger and bigger until it just exploded into this ball of energy. And it was a gold, white, swirling mass of energy. But it was, it filled me with unconditional love. It was very, very peaceful. And I knew right away that I had experienced that feeling before. And as a child, I had that experience, and I knew it was my guardian angel. And so the guardian angel ended up, summoning me through this black void. And I ended up at this entrance, like a doorway. And I went through the doorway. I knew immediately that I was in a different dimension, a whole totally different realm. There were stars and planets, and it was beautiful. It was just amazing and beautiful. And the guardian angel was still there. But I saw this other being, this huge, large being of light. And it was also, had the gold and white swirling energy, but it had this blueness about it. And it was like the blue of the cosmos or the universe. And it was like totally surrounding, and it enveloped me, and it was inside of me, and I was inside of it. It was like we were one. And I was just reveling in all of that. And it was just showering me with overwhelming and unconditional love. And I was very much in awe. And I felt honored to be in its presence. But I wasn't afraid. And I was contemplating all of that when my surroundings started dissolving. And I noticed the ground beneath my feet, that there was, even though I didn't feel like I had feet or human body, it was mostly just pure consciousness. But there was this grass that's green I had never seen before, and flowers, colors I just don't have words for in the English language. They're so beautiful. I felt like the colors I could taste. And I think that's called, I wrote that down actually, synesthesia, right? I love words. So I wrote this one down. Yeah. And I was studying upon all of that and reveling in all of that when everything got still, quiet. And I heard this voice, even though I didn't have ears. I felt the voice. I felt it down deep in my soul. And it said, "Sit with me." And I looked around, and there were no chairs or benches or anything. It was just the grass, and there was a babbling brook. And so I just sat down. And as soon as I sat, there was this overwhelming download. I felt like the entire universe had been downloaded into my consciousness. It was like ancient, timely technologies, anything and everything that you can imagine, all at once. And I knew it was like an understanding, because telepathically I was told that I could unpack it later. I didn't have to think about it all right then, because I would unpack it as I needed it, whenever it was necessary. And I was thinking about all of that, and I thought, oh, where's my husband? I hadn't, up until that moment, I hadn't thought about family, home, my body, me as a human being. And I thought, he would love to hear about this. Where's my husband? And as soon as that thought formed, whoosh, I was back in my body. And actually, what happened after that is a year and a half worth of memories trickling in of more NDE. That wasn't all of it, but at that time I didn't know that. There was more to the NDE. Would you like to hear?
Yeah, I
more?
was just going to ask you.
Okay. I ended up in this city of ancient buildings, and they were, white marble, comparable to, they were reminiscent of ancient Greece. And the one building that I was being summoned to, and I entered, looked like a grand library. And it had this one table in the middle of the room, an ancient, old looking table, conference table. But it was sidled with bookshelves, books as high as the eye could see. And on this table, there was one book. And I say book loosely because it actually looked more like a tablet or an iPad. And there was streaming my life. So this is my life review. This didn't come out until almost a year later that I remembered this. There were beings, but I did not interact with them, but there were beings in that room, and they all seemed to be studying, their own books at their own tables. And I hadn't really thought much about it until just now. And so the life review, I was being shown, all the things that I'd done in my life, mostly, just major events, but there were little things too. Like, if I had upset someone, or said something to hurt someone's feelings, but I didn't just see what was being shown to me. And, as me, I also felt what the other person felt if I had hurt their feelings. I felt their grief and their sorrow. But the opposite was true as well. If I complimented someone or, made someone happy, I saw the smile and joy on their face. But I also felt it. I felt what they felt as well. And I've got a one particular story that I told in my book, but I don't necessarily have to tell it here. But I was going through this life review. I was also at that time, this is where I think the other beings come in, being shown and told what would happen if I made a decision to stay in that peaceful place or to go back to my body. I was told the choice was mine. And that if I, stayed, what would happen to my husband and my daughter and my grandson and the people that I love. I was also shown what my life would be like if I decided to return, and that I would be this big beacon of hope, and that I was going to tell my story and, awaken some people and, bring some love and joy to a lot of lives maybe, and help, the great awakening and help raise the vibration of the planet. And there were all these wonderful things. And, that all sounds great when you're on the other side. But when you think about going back to this broken body that was, that all of a sudden, for the first time, I was shown and saw my body. And I knew it was me because my husband was kneeling beside me and he was crying with his face in his hands. And I literally felt his heart breaking. And at the same time, I had remembered what they had told me that would happen to my daughter, and the depression and the deep-rooted chaos that would come. And the decision wasn't hard after that. I made the decision to return to my body. And so I did. As soon as I made the decision, it was immediate. It was another whoosh. I was right back into my body. But that was actually, I didn't return twice. That was actually the time that I did. And I only remembered that maybe a year later.
You were giving a download that you were able to unpack when you found it necessary.
Correct.
What have you unpacked so far?
Oh my. Well, for the longest time, not much of anything. I was really confused because I didn't remember right away the NDE. It didn't come to me. I came back to a body full of pain. I was racked with pain. I had the broken neck. I also had the polyneuropathy that I already had the pain. because I had the medication for that particular pain. So it was pain on top of pain. And my husband was loading me into his truck and trying to find a hospital and doctors to figure out what was wrong with me. So all of that was going on. And until all of that, I got through all of that, and found a doctor that would treat me and believe my story, which was kind of strange, having a seizure, breaking your neck on the back of a chair. So when I found the doctor that did treat me, and I had my wits about me again. I wasn't in extreme pain. I started having memories and of the NDE.
Did you believe the memories at first, or did you think it was just imagination?
Kind of sort of thought it didn't feel like a dream, though. It was too real. Actually, it's more real there than it is here. After the NDE, the life here on earth feels more like a dream, and that feels more real.
Yeah, many people say something similar to that.
Yeah, I've heard other people say that. I've researched that. I didn't realize I'd had a near-death experience. I started researching it. I didn't know the term. And so I researched it and found the term near death, and then I really researched it to death. Mm-hmm. That's when I found out about the grand library that I was shown and taken into. That's when I found out about the Akashic Records. It's called the Hall of Truth,
okay.
Or the Book of Truth, I think. That's what it's called.
Even though it's a little, it sounds like, what did you unpack?
A lot about why, of course, why we're here.
Yeah, why is that?
For life lessons and experience, the experiences. And that's pretty much why we're here. The universe, God, source, creator, whatever you'd like to call it, is pure love and knew nothing else. So he created humans, other beings, so that it could experience duality. I guess it would be duality. There's both dark and light. There's good and evil here. A lot of that suffering, chaos, war, in addition to love. And so we're here as fractals of that being. And so we're all having our own unique experiences. And through us, it's experiencing everything we experience. And those are the life lessons.
Who was the being that told you to sit with you?
That's who I ultimately decided I would call God, source, creator.
You mentioned that you saw your spirit guide as well.
My guardian angel.
I mean, your guardian angel, okay.
Right.
What did he or she look like?
It didn't look anything like the angels and the books and the pictures that we see. It's a being of light, pure energy, light with a golden and sometimes flecks of white.
All right.
But I had experienced some of this when I was a child, just mostly the feeling, the energy, and the feeling of unconditional love. But it was nothing like the unconditional love that I experienced in my near-death experience. And as a child, also throughout my teenage years, things would happen, like I'd be walking through the woods near my grandfather's cabin, and I had this, I don't know if it was intuition. I felt something dark or foreboding maybe, and decided to turn around and go back toward the cabin, and a tree actually fell right there where I was walking. And so things like that were happening all throughout my life. And I always felt like that was my guardian angel.
How did your life change after your NDE? I mean, any
Oh my.
paranormal things start happening?
Actually, I'm glad you asked. um, for the past year, I've been meditating a lot, and I'll pray during my meditation, and I get downloads. I receive downloads during my meditations. And part of, or most recently, I've received downloads and information about Three Eye Atlas.
Wow.
And
what is that?
I can tell you, most people are thinking or saying, it's comet, asteroid. And I can tell you that more than likely, this is just my thinking, that it's being perceived or it's showing itself as a comet, asteroid, instead of a ship. So not to scare people, but it is a ship.
Like a living being that happens to be a ship?
It has consciousness, yes.
That it looks like a comet or something, so people don't understand what it is.
I don't know if it's a way of maybe cloaking itself. I'm not sure. It disguises itself, I'm sure. Something like that. But it is a ship, really large, as massive. I don't even know how to describe, it's how big it is. But there are a lot of beings, a lot of different races. I most recently saw
on the ship. Is that what you're saying?
On the ship, yes. Like Lyrans. Have you heard of Lyrans?
Yes.
I believe that they have a lot of the codes that's going to help our DNA, because we originally have, we do have the 12-strand DNA, and we originally had, I'm sure you've heard the story about the Anunnaki messing with their DNA so that we would be slaves, and we've been enslaved all of these years. But those abilities can come back. And I think Three Eye Atlas is going to help that. The ship itself, it's, I think, behind the sun or something right now, and we can't really see it. But when it comes around and goes toward Mars, which it's heading toward Mars, I did find that out. And, there was something else about the Martians, but I can talk about that later. But when it gets closer to Earth, the frequency alone is going to raise our vibration, our frequency, and it's going to help a lot of people wake up.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be passing Mars literally today, or if not today, tomorrow, and they're supposed to be able to take pictures of it from Mars.
Nice. I wonder what it's going to look like.
Yeah, me too. And so what about the Martians?
Well, I don't know if you know the story about Mars. It's been a couple of years ago that I got the information, started getting information about Mars. I had interest in the moon. I don't know how I ended up on Mars. When I was meditating and trying to connect with the moon, because I'd heard about dark technologies on the dark side of the moon. And I ended up seeing Mars and finding out, I believe, it looked like a nuclear war had taken place. And the Martians left. And I believe a lot of them came to Earth. And the ones that aren't actually above ground, I believe they're underground, inner Earth. And that's what I was told. But they're also, because of Three Eye Atlas, just recently, I was told, now you can take any or all of this with a grain of salt. But this is, I was told that coming back or going back to Mars. They're hoping, for a 3I Atlas to help Mars and the atmosphere there, and they're wanting to return home.
Another
Who
guest
knows?
of another guest of mine recently kind of said the same thing, that there may
No,
that there
really?
yeah, it was just the other day that
Oh,
with 3I Atlas
uh-huh.
there are other Martian beings returning along with it. I may have not published it yet. I don't remember because
Oh,
I, I
wow.
see. For the last 2 days, I've literally recorded two people at twice. Two people a day.
Uh-huh.
So I've just recorded 4 podcasts in the last 2 days, and I can't remember if I posted it already or haven't posted it.
Mm,
But I
I
I
don't
was just
believe in
talking about
coincidences,
with
by the
somebody.
way.
Yeah, and
I,
it's amazing is it's very often that one podcast will kind of lead into the next one, like a
uh-huh.
guest, like you're coming in now saying the same thing that someone else said a couple days ago.
Right. Interesting.
What other type of downloads have you gotten recently?
I did receive about the timeline a shift, or it split actually.
What
We have
happened with that?
we've got 3D and 5D, and we're going to the higher. We're on the higher 5D timeline. However, the 3D, those people are going down kicking and screaming. you know, they want to stay in that chaos and war and madness. I don't know why, but they're slow to awaken. That doesn't mean that they won't. They will all eventually awaken and realize that they're souls and beings and awaken. But I was shown all of that during that event, or the Charlie Kirk assassination, when all that was going on. As when I was hearing things online about a rapture, event coming, and it's not that I believe that half the population is going to disappear. I believe it's alchemically. It's where lost souls are going to be revived, and um, people are going to awaken. A lot of people woke up, and their vibration, of course, was raising. The frequency was raising, and people that went to church, they'd never been to church before, opened a Bible, and they hadn't opened a Bible in 10 years. There was a lot going on because of the Charlie Kirk assassination.
Have you seen anything about what's coming in the near future for humanity or the Earth?
All I can say about that is what I was talking about, the timeline, or the timeline split, is we are headed the positive timeline to 5D. So we're awakening humanity, and it only takes a certain percentage, I believe, for humanity to be awake, to raise the collective consciousness. But Mother Earth, is also raising her consciousness at the same time. So we're going through this together, which means, I guess, ultimately, that's 2 Earths. There will be the 3D Earth and the 5D Earth, the new Earth and the old Earth.
Will it physically be on the same planet, but just in different frequencies?
Exactly. We'll all be walking the Earth. But if you're in 5D consciousness, of course, you're awake to more things. It's like, for instance, the other beings that I know and saw that were on the ship, the 3I Atlas, are also walking among us. But, in 3D, you can't see them. They're also in inner Earth, but of course, we don't go to inner Earth. That's, I think, one of the entrances is in Antarctica. That was another thing I ended up meditating on, was Antarctica and everything that was going on there. But it all ultimately leads to this timeline shift. And that's where we're headed, into 5D. In actuality, everyone, all of humanity, will raise to 5D eventually. It's just going to take a lot longer for the people in 3D to raise. No one's going to be left. And that was my message. That's what I was supposed to come back to tell, that it was a promise that I made to God, or Creator, universe, whatever you like to call.
The promise is that nobody will be left out.
No, everyone crosses over. Everyone goes into that realm.
Everyone goes to 5D eventually.
Everyone will go to 5D, yes. Mm-hmm.
That's a good message.
It's just going to take a whole lot longer for them. Who wants to suffer longer?
Would you say that's a message from the other side or a message from Source?
Message from Source. Directly from Source, yes. That was the message I was to come back. So that people, I think statistically, it's like fear is, the biggest fear is death. But there should be no fear of death. It's the most peaceful, unconditional love I've ever felt in my life. And that's what we all have to look forward to. And the second thing is, while we're here on Earth, is to love each other. If you were to love the person in front of you, beside you, behind you, the person you meet on the bus, at school, at work, just show them a little kindness, tell them a joke, pat them on the back, give them an attaboy, and make their day. The world would be a much kinder, gentler place. You're also raising the consciousness, raising the awareness.
Since your NDE, have you started seeing UFOs?
Yes. But nothing's landed in my backyard. Just in the sky. Nice.
What
My
types?
husband, I have a pool in my backyard. I have a 30-foot in-ground pool in my backyard. So my husband and I we just closed the pool actually yesterday. So my husband and I spend a lot of time outside, and I see, look at the stars a lot, and some of them were not moving like stars. They put on a show sometimes. It just, it floored me at first. I wasn't shocked, as in I didn't believe. I already, knew that we were not the only beings in this universe. It's not possible, to think of humans as being the only beings in this giant universe, the galaxies.
Do you feel that these UFOs are putting on a show for you personally?
In the beginning, no. The most recent was only about a week ago, on the weekend. Again, my husband and I, but he had gone in, and I stayed out to swim, and I was in the shallow end of the pool, and looking up, not thinking much about, the stars. Really wasn't thinking about maybe I'd see a UFO, when I did. And I didn't see one, and then I saw two, and then there were three. And I thought, oh, this is great. But then I think they started putting on a show, because they would follow each other. They would make patterns and then follow each other. And it made me laugh. And they started swirling. And I felt like maybe they were laughing with me, like, they saw me laugh or something. I don't know. Maybe I made that up in my mind. But yeah, I think so.
Do you think they were actual ships or possibly light beings just putting on a show for you?
I don't know. Because in the past, I guess, 6 months, I have heard that it's not just ships that show up in that form, that there could be beings. So honestly, I don't know which one it was.
If you had a friend that was grieving over the loss of a loved one, what kind of advice would you give?
Depending on whether they heard about my near-death experience or not, I might relay a little bit of that to them. But mostly I would just tell them that they only had to go inside within their heart and they could feel that loved one, and that loved one would be close to them for the rest of their lives, and they would indeed get to see them again.
Have the memories of your NDE faded over time?
Oh, no. No. Once I did get the memories, they were very vivid. Like I said before, it's very real. I'm not sure to call it a place, a realm, a dimension that you actually enter, when you leave your body as a soul. But it's so very real, much more real than it is here. So everything is just like yesterday or last night. Very vivid.
Well, you wrote a book about your NDE called Sit With Me, A Divine Revelation.
A divine.
What is the main takeaway that the reader should get from your book?
That we are all souls, beings, and not to fear death. That we will all pass away, but we are all gathered together as souls in the other realm, in another dimension, and no one gets left behind. But while we're here on Earth, we need to love each other. I'm not sure if I should say this and you put it on air or not, but this is just for you, because in the past few days, couple of days, I knew that I was doing this. I meditated a little about this interview and was hoping I wouldn't be too anxious. And I was pretty much told that you're doing exactly what you were supposed to do. You decided to do this as a soul, and you are awakening masses of people.
It's
and
good
I
to have
commend you.
Well,
I commend you for that.
Thank you, and it's good to have the confirmation.
Thank you.
If people want to find out more about your book, where should they go?
It's all the online bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Do you have a website?
I don't. I'm in the process of, I have a marketing agent who's marketing my book right now. And he's going to, I think, design the website for me. But I can be found on my publisher's website, which is called BookLocker, booklocker.com. I can also be found on social media, Facebook, Instagram.
If people want to ask you questions, are you open to that?
Sure. Yes, definitely. Earlier when I was talking about 3-Eye Atlas, and I was shown our 12-strand DNA, and that 3-Eye Atlas is not only going to help raise our vibration, but it will activate our DNA, and we will receive gifts like telepathy and a teleportation. And then we're also, of course, going to receive technologies because we're extremely powerful beings. And that's why I believe, the dark side is afraid of us, because they fear if we wake up, we'll find out just how powerful we are. And then they, can't control us anymore.
Who is the dark side that is controlling us?
I call them a lot of things. There's the deep state, the oligarchy, the dark side. As far as human beings go, I don't think there's, statistically, I don't think there's that many people, maybe 1,000, that actually control the world and the narrative that we're given, through media, etc. And it's not just the United States, it's the whole world. I don't know specifically who they are. I know that there were bloodlines. I'm sure you've heard about the bloodlines all over Europe and right.
Yeah, right. That's another podcast that we just talked about recently.
I'm a plethora of strange information, lots of different tidbits, and sometimes I don't exactly know how to connect them.
Susan, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
As soul beings, we are powerful, as I just said, and we create our own reality. Be careful with your thoughts, but also strive for bigger things. Put yourself in that brand new car, put yourself in that brand new job or house. Strive for bigger things. And the world is at your feet. The universe just wants to please you.
Susan, thank you for your message, and thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.